They say that sometimes life gives us things that don't seem like gifts. A burden, a problem, a load we didn't ask for. And although at first we don't understand why we have to carry it, later we discover something profound. Not everything we receive is a reward. Sometimes it's a mission. Today you'll learn the story of a young man who believed he had been treated unfairly, until he discovered that what seemed like a meager wage was actually an act of trust that would change his life forever. A story about sacrifice, responsibility, and the surprising way life prepares us for what we don't yet see. The sun was just beginning to rise over the fields of San Jacinto when Mauricio, a 24-year-old, walked with a determined stride toward the Los Tres Robles ranch. He had been working there for months, from dawn until the last light of day faded behind the hills. Despite his exhaustion, he always held his head high. He knew what it was like to live with little. She knew what it was like to work hard without anyone noticing. But she also knew something else, that one day all that effort would be worthwhile. Or at least, that's what she wanted to believe. The ranch belonged to Don Rigoberto Montenegro, an elderly man whose fortune was as vast as his reputation for being tough, reserved, and extremely demanding. The workers respected him, but they also feared him. Mauricio, however, was never afraid. His father had taught him from childhood, respect isn't begged for. It's earned through work. That was why, every morning, Mauricio was the first to arrive and the last to leave. That week had been particularly hard. He had repaired corrals, cleaned stables, transported fodder, and helped the head caretaker feed the horses. His hands were cracked and his legs no longer complained. They only responded out of habit. But that day, there was a different gleam in his eyes. It was payday. Finally, he whispered as he crossed the main gate. He wasn't expecting riches or luxuries. He was only expecting justice, to be paid for the work he had done. That was his only immediate dream, to raise enough money to repair the roof of his house, which could no longer withstand another rainy season. When he arrived, he noticed several workers murmuring near the large stable. The atmosphere was strange, almost heavy. Mauricio, called Tomas, an older man with whom he worked closely. "I don't think today is going to be a good day." "Why do you say that?" he asked. Tomas lowered his voice, as if afraid they would overhear him. "Don Rigoberto isn't in a good mood. He lost a big deal yesterday. Rumor has it he'll pay today in his own way." Mauricio frowned. "It doesn't matter what mood he's in," he said firmly. "You work, you get paid. That's how it should be." Tomas sighed. "I wish it were always like that, kid." Mid-morning, a foreman called Mauricio over. "Don Rigoberto wants to see you," he announced. Mauricio wiped his hands on his pants and walked toward the main house. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. He might finally receive what he so desperately needed. The foreman led him to the backyard, where Don Rigoberto was watching one of his favorite horses drink from a stone trough. The boss looked at him as soon as he arrived. "Mauricio," he said in a deep voice, "you've worked well these past few months." "Thank you, boss," the young man replied respectfully. "But," the man continued, that word cut through the air, "but today I won't be able to pay you as you expected." Mauricio felt his stomach clench. "What did you say, boss?" Don Rigoberto turned to a nearby stable and ordered, "Bring him here." Two ranch hands came out leading a horse. Mauricio had seen many sick animals, but never one in this condition. It was a thin, trembling horse with sunken eyes. Its breathing was weak and ragged, as if each breath costed its life. Its dull, bristling coat reflected neglect and illness. It was obvious. The animal was dying. "Mauricio," said Don Rigoberto, "this will be your payment." The young man froze. "My payment?" "Yes. I can't keep him in my stable any longer, and I need you to take him and look after him." One of the farm hands let out a stifled laugh. Another muttered, "What a way to pay." Mauricio's face flushed. He wanted to protest, to ask questions, to demand something. But Don Rigoberto held out a small hand. It was a folded note. "Take this with you. Read it when you're alone." Mauricio took the note. He didn't understand anything. "Boss," he tried to say, "I worked hard. I can't." "This is what you'll get today," the man interrupted curtly. The silence was brutal. Mauricio gritted his teeth. He looked at the horse, then into the boss's eyes. He found no explanation. He found no justice. But he found something that had always been within him: dignity. He took a deep breath. "If this is your payment," he said firmly, trying to keep his voice from breaking. "Then I'll take it." He took the horse's lead rope. No one said anything as the young man walked slowly toward the gate, leading the animal that could barely stand. The looks on their faces were a mixture of mockery, pity, and surprise. "Poor boy," a woman said. "That's what happens when you trust," another added. Tomas tried to approach, but Mauricio shook his head. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to break down in front of anyone. When he was far enough away, he let his breath tremble. A mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion coursed through him. He looked at the horse. His breathing was now barely a whisper. "What did you do, old man?" he muttered to himself. "Why did you give me this?" Only then did he remember the note. He stopped beside a tree, unfolded the paper, and read, "Take care of him until you understand why he's yours." He frowned. It all felt absurd. "Take care of him. He's dying," he whispered. But he put the note away. He didn't know why, but something in those words sent a strange chill through him. Not from fear, but from intuition, as if that phrase held more than it seemed. When he arrived home, evening was falling. He left the horse in the small, makeshift corral behind his humble dwelling. He cleaned the area. He brought him water. He looked for medicinal herbs he had learned to use from the village veterinarian. The animal looked at him with tired eyes, but there was still a small glimmer. A spark of life. Mauricio sat on the ground beside him. "I don't know why they gave it to me," he said, "but I'm not going to let him die alone." The horse rested its head against the fence. That night, he didn't sleep. Every so often, he went out to check on the horse, gave it water, covered it with a blanket, and cleaned it. But the decline was evident. It seemed as if life was slowly fading, like a candle about to go out. Mauricio was exhausted, mentally and physically, and yet he didn't give up. He didn't know why, but he felt a strange responsibility, as if that horse were there for a reason he couldn't yet understand. The week dragged on. Each day was a struggle. The horse held on, but its breathing grew weaker and weaker. Sometimes, for a few minutes, it seemed to improve, but then it would relapse. Mauricio no longer expected it to live, but he did hope for something more, that its death wouldn't be in vain. On the morning of the 7th day, the horse barely opened its eyes and closed them forever. Mauricio felt a lump in his throat. He didn't cry, but inside, he broke. 7 days of effort. 7 days of dedication. 7 days charging a payment I didn't understand. Mauricio felt he had to do more, that this animal deserved a dignified end, even in death. So, with great effort, he built a small, makeshift cart to take it to the town veterinarian. It was a long and arduous journey, but he didn't hesitate for a second to undertake it. When he arrived, the veterinarian, a robust man with a deep voice, opened his eyes wide. "What are you doing bringing a dead horse here at this hour?" he asked, surprised. Mauricio told him everything, from the fact that the boss had given it to him as payment to his attempts to save it. The veterinarian's face changed, from simple surprise to a serious, almost alarmed expression. "May I examine it?" he asked urgently. Mauricio nodded. The veterinarian began to examine the body quickly. He touched its skin, checked its mouth, parted the fur near its neck. His hands moved with knowledge and concern. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "Son, this horse wasn't dying from just any disease." Mauricio felt a shudder. What did he have? The veterinarian stared at him. An extremely rare, contagious disease. Highly deadly, but only for horses kept in the same stable. If this animal had stayed with the owner's others, it would have killed them all in a matter of days. Mauricio's eyes widened in horror. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," he affirmed. "I've never seen such an advanced case. It must have been separated from the group the very day it started showing symptoms." Mauricio clenched his fists. "The owner didn't tell me anything. He just gave me a note." He pulled the crumpled paper from his pocket. "Take care of it until you understand why it's yours." The veterinarian sighed. "I think you already understand, young man." Mauricio returned home with a jumble of emotions difficult to decipher. Pain, astonishment, confusion, and something deeper, a newfound clarity. The horse hadn't been an unfair payment. The owner hadn't meant to take advantage. He had meant to protect the other animals. He knew that horse was very sick, and he knew that someone had to get him away from the stable before it was too late. That someone had been Mauricio. Why him? Because he was a good worker. Because he didn't complain. Because he was reliable. Or because he had enough humanity not to ignore a sick life. As he stood before his empty stable, The note echoed in his mind, taking on new meaning. Take care of him until you understand why he's yours. And now he understood. Not everything that seems unfair is. Not everything that seems like payment is a reward. Sometimes it's a mission in disguise. Don found Mauricio sitting before the empty stable, the boss's note clutched in his hands. It was the same note as always, but now its words held a completely different meaning. Take care of him until you understand why he's yours. Before, those words were a mystery. Now, they were a painful reflection of a greater truth. Mauricio no longer saw an unfair payment, but a silent sacrifice. An act he had performed without understanding, but one that had prevented a greater tragedy. However, one question remained, tormenting him. Why him? Why did the boss choose him from among so many workers? What did he see in him that made him worthy of carrying the dying horse? Determined to get answers, he grabbed his jacket, took a deep breath, and walked toward the hacienda. That day he wasn't looking for work or instructions. He was looking for the truth. The hacienda was as imposing as ever. Stone columns, perfect gardens, gleaming windows. But Mauricio wasn't there for the beauty of the place. He was there because he needed to understand. He knocked on the door. Once, twice, 3 times. The foreman opened it and looked at him with disdain. What are you doing here so early? Mauricio met his gaze without hesitation. I need to speak with the boss. There was an awkward silence. The foreman seemed to want to deny him entry, but he noticed something different about the young man. A new firmness, a maturity he hadn't seen before. Finally, he grunted. Wait here. After what felt like an eternity, the boss appeared. His presence filled the room. He was elegantly dressed, with his usual calm demeanor and deep eyes that seemed to hold untold stories. Mauricio, he said, I figured you'd come. The young man swallowed. I need to understand something. Come in, the boss replied, inviting him inside. They both walked toward the main room. There, surrounded by dark furniture and antique paintings, Mauricio felt small, but not intimidated. This time, he was willing to listen. I know about the horse, Mauricio began. The vet told me how sick it was. And he also said that if it had stayed in the stable, it would have infected the others. The boss nodded, unsurprised. Then why did you give it to me? Why as payment? Why not tell me the truth? Mauricio asked, his voice trembling. The boss studied him carefully before answering. Mauricio, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who obey orders, and those who understand the purpose. The young man frowned, waiting for more. The boss walked to the window. If I told the other workers the truth, no one would have wanted to go near the horse. They would have been afraid. They would have rejected it. Because most people only help when they feel it's worthwhile. He turned to Mauricio. But you're not the majority. The words pierced the young man's heart. I've observed the way you work, the boss continued. You don't complain. You don't take the easy way out. You don't abandon what you start. You take care, even when no one acknowledges it. Mauricio felt a lump in his throat. So he chose me because he knew I wouldn't reject him. I chose you because I knew you would do the right thing even without understanding the reason, the boss replied. I knew you wouldn't let a living being die alone. I knew you would endure this mission, even if it hurt. Mauricio lowered his gaze, feeling his chest open. And yet it was so painful, she whispered. The boss responded with something that would stay with him forever. Important missions always hurt. If they don't hurt, they don't teach you anything. Mauricio was trying to process it all. You could have given it to any of the workers. No, the boss replied. Most only take care of what's useful. But you take care of what suffers. You take care of what others would abandon. The boss paused. And I didn't just do it for the horses. I did it for you too. Mauricio raised his eyebrows. For me, the boss sighed. I've seen your life. Always carrying the load alone. Always working hard. Always giving more than you receive. And while that makes you noble, it also weighs too heavily on you. Sometimes, my boy, you need a painful mission to remember your worth. Those words hit Mauricio like a hug he didn't know he needed. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. The boss took out a folded document and handed it to him. It was the horse's medical record, dated weeks earlier. Did you already know he was sick? Mauricio asked. For some time, the boss admitted. But I couldn't just put him down. He was a noble animal. He deserved to spend his last days with dignity. And I knew you would give him that. The boss's voice grew more serious. Giving you that horse wasn't a reward. It was an act of trust. Mauricio closed his eyes and felt something healing inside him. Something deep. Something he hadn't realized was breaking him. What you did wasn't small, the boss affirmed. You saved my horses. You saved my ranch. And you fulfilled a mission no one else would have accepted. Mauricio lowered his gaze. I only did what I thought was right. The boss smiled, an unusual gesture for him. That's why you deserve more than just a simple payment. He took a thick envelope from a drawer. This is for you. This is your true reward. Not for taking care of the horse, but for showing who you are. Mauricio took the envelope, but more than its contents, he felt the weight of something much greater. Recognition. Trust. Mission accomplished. And before leaving the room, the boss added, remember this. Sometimes, life gives you something that seems unfair, when in reality it's training you for something great. Mauricio left the ranch with a renewed heart. He was no longer the same. The mission hadn't changed. And now, he understood why it was his. Dawn was just beginning to illuminate the ranch when Mauricio returned. Although the air was fresh, his insides were still seething, as if all the emotions of the past few days were resisting being extinguished. He walked along the path towards the stables, now with slow steps, observing every detail like someone returning to a familiar place, but with a new perspective. When he arrived, he found the boss leaning against the fence, looking at his horses with an expression Mauricio had never seen on his face. There was worry, weariness, and a strange relief that seemed to have been bottled up for years. I want to tell you something else, the boss said. Something I've never told anyone. Mauricio listened attentively. The boss recounted how, when he was young, he had worked for a man who treated him as if he were invisible. He gave him the heaviest, most difficult tasks, the ones no one else wanted to do. Until one day, when his favorite horse fell ill, he entrusted it to him. And he said the exact same thing. Take care of him until you understand why he's yours. In the end, he understood too. Some tasks aren't given out of comfort or convenience, but out of trust. His former boss had seen something in him that he himself hadn't known he possessed. And now he was trying to do the same with Mauricio. That moment felt like an ancestral ritual, a silent legacy passed from hard-working hands to noble hearts. A secret calling that only those capable of loving, caring, and sacrificing without expecting anything in return can understand. Mauricio lowered his gaze, his voice breaking. Thank you, boss. I didn't know. You didn't have to know, he replied. Greatness lies in what you do without knowing. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was a silence filled with understanding. Then, the boss delivered unexpected news. Mauricio, from today on, I don't want you to be just a farmhand anymore. I want you to take charge of the well-being of all the animals on the ranch. You will be the one who cares for us, who protects us, because someone who honors even those who can no longer be saved is someone capable of protecting those who still have a chance. Mauricio felt his chest swell with pride. It wasn't just any promotion. It was recognition. It was trust. It was purpose. I won't let you down, he promised. I know, the boss replied with a slight smile. That night, under a bright, silent moon, Mauricio walked to the hill where he had buried the horse. He had left a round stone on the ground as a memento. He knelt before the grave and whispered, Thank you. Although I didn't understand it at first, you were a mission. Thanks to you, I am a different person. The wind blew softly through the trees, as if the universe were answering him. Mauricio closed his eyes and, for the first time in a long time, felt a profound peace, a peace that came from having found his place, his worth, and his purpose. The next day, the ranch seemed new. The horses whinnied more loudly, as if they sensed the change. Mauricio checked on them one by one, with a different kind of dedication, more conscious, more human. As he worked, a truth formed within him. Sometimes life doesn't pay you with what you want, but with what you need to learn. That thought stayed with him as he looked up at the sky, feeling stronger, more whole, more himself. He had received the lesson that would mark the rest of his life. Not every payment is a reward. Sometimes it's a mission. When life gives you something you don't understand, don't ask, why me? But rather, what for? Perhaps it's not a punishment. Perhaps it's the calling that will transform you into the person you are meant to be. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe and like it. Every story we share here is a seed, and you are the soil where it can blossom. Thank you for reading to the end.